Hello, YouTube! Today...
Actually, that's not their name anymore.
What?
Yeah, they decided to rebrand after all of the kind of bad publicity that they've gotten under the name YouTube.
Really?
They thought that maybe with a fresh start, they, and a fresh new name, that things would turn out better for them.
Fascinating. What if they decided to change their name to?
Nerfy McFuckface. They actually had me do the announcement about the new name.
God, I wonder, is it like strictly enforced? Like people who start out their videos saying
YouTube
are gonna have to say hello. What was it? Nerfy McFuckface?
Yeah. Well, it's. I think we all should be sensitive and use their preferred nomenclature, you know what I mean?
All right, well, I certainly shall abide by that. Okay, well, I guess I'll get on with the show. Does anybody else have anything, if I may? Hey, Edward.
I had made a post because Pew has been making shorts, like makeup, like shorts. She has a YouTube channel, Pursuits of Pew. Be sure to click through and subscribe. Anyway, yesterday I had made a post saying, "Greetings, chicken philosophers," saying our better half is at 197 subscribers, and asking if maybe a few people wouldn't mind subscribing, so get it up to 200. I want to say thank you to whoever did, because she is up to 200 now.
Right.
She was embarrassed when she saw that I had made that post and made me delete it. So
yeah.
Anyway, just wanted to share about that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm already subscribed. Okay, have a good show. Happy 15th of 15 finale of the what's it called? The beginning of 4715.
Thank you. Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy.
The Meccan Revelations, part 65, in which we will pick up right where Edward left off in part 64. Oh, that one. That one was ridiculous, wasn't it? Let's try to make up for some time that was lost in part 64 and do a little more reading. Maybe get a little more through that introduction and toward because it's the beginning of book 2, and those who have been with us since the beginning of Meccan Revelation know that there was a lot of introduction in book 1 before we got to it. At that time, just to kind of like give a boost to the idea of reading the books in the first place, we jumped to the actual translation, and it was great. And then went back, after half an episode. The first half of the first episode was Ibn Arabi. Then we started the introduction and read the introduction for, 4 or 5 episodes, whatever that was. So, we'll see how much of this introduction we can get through today. Let's see. Was there anything else? I don't think so. There's some beverage. We've got some black coffee today in a blue cup with a bird on it. Maybe there's some kind of symbolism. And we've just got some patchouli. Just regular old patchouli with a hole in the bottom, so if I hold it up to show you the name of it, then a bunch of sticks fall out onto the ground. It's by design that way. 3 fell out, so 3 is how many we're going to light. And all right. Hope everybody's been doing all right. So yeah, as he said, this is 15th of 15 of the cycle, and after this episode, Editor Edward will put up a compilation, one of those fun things where it zips through, whatever highlights from each of the 15 episodes in the cycle. For those of you who are new and still watching, if you'd like to start at the beginning of Meccan Revelation, it's right there. And we might be all done with our links by now. I don't know. Maybe there's one more left. Hopefully we won't need to point to anything. All right.
Everything done? Everything good? I can go ahead and continue. Let's do our bibliomancy. Overthinking it. Okay. An infant in your arms. The tide of my love has risen so high, let me flood over you. Close your eyes for a moment, and maybe all your fears and fantasies will end. If that happened, God would become an infant in your arms, and then you would have to nurse all creation. Happens, right? Sometimes. Has to be done. Okay. Let's get to today's reading. As promised, we'll try to make this a little bit of a reading-heavy episode. This is mid-paragraph. The second, one of the densest in the work, is the Bab al-Asrar, the chapter of secrets, where Ibn Arabi claims to sum up all the preceding chapters, one after the other, in a few sentences whose pithy wording is often difficult to penetrate. You know what'll help that. I don't need to tell you. The third chapter, the last in the Futuhat, is practical advice, quote, of benefit to both the aspirant and the individual who has arrived. And, quote, the apparent simplicity of which should not fool us. The position these rules of conduct hold in the Futuhat's structure clearly encourages the reader to recognize their importance and to decipher their relationship to the whole, with a WH. Though they are short, the Fusus al-Hikam, another of Ibn Arabi's major works, have been commented upon by a number of writers, beginning as early as the first generation of his followers. Such was not the case for the Futuhat, whose commentaries are few and far between, and extremely fragmentary. Most of them relate to only a few lines, if not a few words, the first 8 in the text in particular, or to a single verse, like the one at the beginning of the prologue. Abd al-Karim al-Jili, for example, devoted an entire treatise to approximately the first 2 pages of the Bab al-Asrar. Another, later chapter was Emir Abd al-Qadir al-Jazairi, whose aim was, in his Kitab al-Mawaqif, the book of stopping places, in relation to stations, to explain the meanings of several pages from the Kutha, and from chapters. So there's a big 6 and a little 59, a big 69 and a little 60, a big 73 and a little 61, a big 76 and a little 62, and a big 373 and a little 63. Maybe it's like chapter and verse? Or thus, a relatively large number, although in fact his study covered only a small number of pages. Right. So if you write like a 500-page book based on 4 quotes from the Bible, you know what I mean? It's sort of a similar kind of thing. All right. Sharani, in 2 of his works, offers a simplified introduction and, on delicate points, a quite careful presentation to the main subjects touched on in the Futuhat, but he does not limit himself to gathering quotes from Ibn Arabi, and annotates them cursorily.
To the best of our knowledge, not knowledge, I don't know what that was, none of these commentaries has been translated into a European language. Given this situation, an individual exploration of the Futuhat Makkiyah might be as haphazard as it is difficult. We do not claim either to make the task easier or to clear away what traps the work might contain. What we do hope to do in this introduction to reading the Futuhat, and not to the Futuhat themselves, is at least point out a few cardinal points whose citing might prevent the investigator from experiencing a harya that has nothing in common with the erudite ignorance of the Auliya, but the name. Oh, okay. The Sharani, in two of his works, touched on the Futuhat, but didn't talk about the Futuhat. Oh, right. An individual's exploration of the Futuhat. So it was a book about reading the Futuhat. That happened to me where I got the Guru something book, only to realize that what I bought was a very small book about reading the big thick book of the Sikhs. The Sikhs have the Guru Granth Sahib or something like that. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly at all. But they had the 10 gurus, and then the 10th guru, Gobind Singh, said that the 11th guru was the 11th and final guru, and that would be the book, the collection of the teachings. So, anyway, we have referred to the importance. So he's not saying that this is not a translation. He's saying that the thing he's talking about in this paragraph is not a translation, but a guide to reading it. We have referred to the importance, both in volume and in substance, of the Fasl al-Ma'arif. These 900 pages are, in a sense, a long mukaddima, both a preamble to the book that establishes the framework wherein later developments will be set, and a prelude to the journey, instructing the pilgrim in regard to the road to take and the goal to be reached. The keys to deciphering the entire work are to be sought in this initial section. Our attention will thus focus on this section, and especially on its early chapters. However, our purpose is not to offer a summary that puts concepts and symbols into logical order. The how is just as important as the what. Consequently, our aim here is to detect the early emergence of themes and to observe how the threads of the warp and those in the woofs... What? Interweave. How the threads of the warp and those in the woof... Interweave. Okay, Editor Edward, I'm officially going to be bugging you. Could you break down... I'm ignorant as to the warp and the woof?
The warp and the woof refers to two sets of threads used in weaving. The warp are the lengthwise threads held taut on a loom, and the woof, or weft, are the crosswise threads woven through them to create fabric. Figuratively, it means the fundamental structure or the basic elements of something, since we like to use the metaphor of the Persian rug as a metaphor for like all things in 5D space or whatever. This might be a good thing to add to our vocabulary. Persian rug.
Thank you. Wow, my horizons have been broadened. Muslim authors traditionally begin their writings with a two-part doxology, praise to God, and prayer over the Prophet, period. The form it takes may be limited to short phrases or may unfold in a dazzling, pyrotechnic display of rhymed prose that is often richer in sound than it is in content. Such is not the case for Ibn Arabi, whose doxologies are, in themselves, already statements of doctrine, deserving of considerable reflection. The doxology that opens the Futuhat is a prime example of this. I think that was what we started Meccan Revelation Part 1 with. Know that a man's most perfect plane is in the world, or the objects of knowledge are four, that way. It is curious that it also introduces in a quite specific fashion an important event in the author's life. Oh, maybe that wasn't. Never mind. It is not just by chance that, as we have pointed out, the first 8 words, the interpretation of which Ibn Arabi does not return to until much later in the second fossil, have given rise to a good share of the commentaries that have been penned. What looks quite clear on the surface is deceiving. So, just randomly, random divergent thought. I just wanted to put something out there, because there's one guy that I knew from Golden Dawn, I think, that said, I'm really looking forward to watching Meccan Revelation because I converted to Islam, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. It happens every now and then. A white person will, Sinead O'Connor, and anyway, so like not necessarily Sufi, but like, I don't know what branch, inshallah. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say in case you're watching. Hi. Thank you for watching. Love the Sufis. There's a lot of stuff in there. Obviously I'm not, I met a Sufi and he gave me a ring and gave me a blessing and told me I'd meet my wife in India, and then I did, so that's cool. But I didn't convert to Islam. I'm just reading Ibn Arabi, granted. However, there was that post talking about how people are very critical of the comedians that went and gave the comedy routines on behalf of the royal family that likes to use a bone saw to cut up journalists. And I saw your comment there, and I just wanted to put out there that, like how there's a difference between condemning Netanyahu and condemning the Jews, there is a difference between not liking the idea of a comedian going and supporting the royal family in Saudi Arabia and their effort to whitewash their image on the world stage. You had said that was because the people who are criticizing that are being anti-Muslim. No, they're not being anti-Muslim. You should allow for people to criticize the royal family of the Saudi Arabian. It's kind of, paradoxically, it would kind of be anti-Muslim to try to protect the royal family of Saudi Arabia by calling people anti-Muslim for criticizing them. Like, they don't need to be coddled to that degree. Like, go ahead and, it's okay to criticize like people who abuse power generation after generation and systemic oppression of people, and and certainly the United States is also very guilty of many of these things. But yeah, that's a complex issue. That whole comedians in that thing. It's a complex issue. If you're interested, then look into it. But it doesn't need to be dismissed so overly simplistically. Anyway, just because I thought I could do a little bit of good in the world, because I think that he might have been watching this episode, and hope you're not too embarrassed, and don't feel too called out. I'm not naming you or anything, so I just saw your comment, because the way Facebook works, it's like I think it was like one of those posts. It was like on a major network or some major, it was like a big Facebook page, and it says it's like 10,000 comments and whatever. And so because you and I are friends on Facebook, it showed me your comment on that post, and I was like, whew. All right. But anyway, salam alaikum nonetheless. I don't know if I'm using that in the right context. Let's get back to it. Good thing we buried this half an hour into the episode.
And maybe that person won't see it, but oh well. I try a little sometimes. The key here is the... Oh, shit, did I lose my place? What looks quite clear on the surface is deceiving. What? The important events in the author's life, it is not just by chance that, as we have pointed out, the 8 words, okay. The interpretation of which Ibn Arabi does not return to until much later in the second fossil have given rise. Alhamdulillah al-Ladi al-Jada la-Ashia an Adam wa Adamahu. It's sort of like how the CCP is like, anybody who criticizes, Xi Jinping is anti-Chinese and a racist and stuff like that. It's just kind of a too easy of a cop-out, Like, it's good to make an effort to take a step past where, like, maybe our parents or our grandparents might be where they are racist, and to be able to recognize when someone's like critical eye is being influenced in that direction by their racism. But you can always go too far in that direction and not allow for any criticism of a person who happens to be, of a minority race or a non-Christian religion. And always give people a pass, and give them a pass to, again, use a bone saw to chop up journalists. And, there's a point where you gotta say, that's bad, regardless of how open-minded I'm trying to be about their religion. It's not related to the religion in this case. Okay, where were we? I mean, sometimes it gets twisted because, like, there was like a Shinto, the emperor, in Japan in World War II, it was all based on like a kind of a perversion of Shinto, like a Shinto nationalism. And so if you ask a Shinto nationalist or a Hindu nationalist or a Islamic nationalist or a Christian nationalist, they'll say then, oh, well, they're anti-Hindu, they're anti-Christian, they're anti-Muslim, they're anti-whatever they've decided to make the nationalism in the name of. So it's like a fascist defense mechanism to play victim against, a post. I'm trying to avoid using the word woke, even though that's the term today. But if I use it in any other way, then it might sound like I'm like siding with the anti-woke people. I mean, I don't mean to be. Like the other day when I said something about woke Disney, like that was a specific thing, a specific reference. But then when I watched it later, I did a bit of a facepalm. But I try. Gwydion, is good for us all because we don't worry too much. We used to worry. Like if somebody takes one soundbite or if somebody just hears one phrase and it triggers something that makes them click unsubscribe and say, fuck that guy, he and I we disagree or whatever, then it's like, all right. But there was a broader context, and if you kind of knew me or had heard me talk a little bit, then you would know that. Never mind. Shit, I don't know. Did we lose it? Belongs to God. Does not mean the rightful praise. I don't even know what page I'm on. Yeah, okay. Does not mean that praise rightfully belongs to God, but that it comes only from Him and that He is simultaneously both the praiser and the praised. Quote, no one praises God but God Himself, end quote. Ibn Arabi declares, I've read similar things in Meccan Revelation before and stopped and made a big deal about it and go, oh yeah, but now I'm reading through it because it's kind of like, yeah, I've heard this. So if this is your first time watching, sorry you had to miss all that. Check out the whole series. Ibn Arabi declares in his commentary on the Fatiha in chapter 5 of the Futuhat. What? There's a period there. Okay. Oh, no one praises God but God Himself. Yeah. It sounds familiar. I don't know why you're telling me that as if I didn't know. In chapter 350, where he deals with the Tujuh,
The veils, meaning the creatures themselves, in that they hide the omnipresence of God. Yes, I remember this. It seems like he's reviewing kind of stuff we read in Book 1. He describes the spiritual abode, or manzil, in which one receives the knowledge of this praise of God by God. Emir Abd al-Qadir was inspired by the same passage in chapter 5 and saw 3 different categories of beings in these first 2 words of the Kuta. I feel like maybe I read this whole page already, but it's like, how is it that it's not more obvious to me that I'm reading this for the second time? By themselves, the elite who praise God through God, and the elite of the elite, whose praise belongs to God, since individuals in this category of being know that it is God who, through their lips, is addressing himself. I mean, again, this is all familiar from things before, but I don't think I've read this page today before. Okay. The men of the lam, the first letter in the particle li, are thus superior to the men of the letter ba, the first letter of the article B, since B implies the subsistence of the praiser, while Li implies his extinction. Right. If you exist to praise God, then you are inferior, to use an unfortunate term, to the one who has ceased to exist and has merged with God, or something. Unless you ask the Seeker of the Golden Flower, then they said, oh, you fucked up. You should have run the energy backwards up the tailbone and let your feminine side merge with your masculine side. Then you'd be walking around like the Pharaoh with your slippers in the afterlife instead of merging with the great oneness, because that's the goal, right? What do you think? Merging with the great oneness, or walking around like the Pharaoh with golden slippers and a cat and concubines? Well, we know what these guys are, not necessarily Ibn Arabi, but never mind. The whole 72 angels of the Shem Fresh thing. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Got some Shem angels. Sorry. Where were we? I don't know. We'll try again. Let's keep going. Al-Ladi Aujada Ashila can be translated into who brought things into existence, but Shay, thing, which is the singular of Ashia, refers as much to what is in existence as to what is non-existent in Ibn Arabi's terminology, which is the case here. References to scripture, which underlie all of Ibn Arabi's doctrinal writings, are not present in this case. On one hand, verse 19:8 asserts that, quote, we created you while you were nothing, end quote, or literally, quote, while you were not a thing, end quote. And on the other, 8 verses, 2:114, 3:47, 3:59, 6, I'm not going to, a bunch of other ones, declare that when God wants something to be, he says be, and it is, Roger Waters. Thank you, Roger Waters. In his commentary on these verses, Ibn Arabi never hesitates to point out that they imply that the thing was not pure nothingness, since God's words are addressed to it, and it hears. The first verse we cited, on the other hand, supposes the coming into existence of something that did not exist in any respect, and this point of view appears to be prevalent in the first phrase of the Khutbah. This interpretation is reinforced by the following words, quote, an Adam wa Adamahu, end quote. The whole thus translated, thank you for translating it, as, quote, praise belongs to God who brought things into existence from nothing and annihilated nothingness, end quote. You know how much of a fan of nothingness I am, but I'm not worried about it being annihilated, because 0 minus 0 is still 0. 0 times 0, also still 0. 0 divided by 0, infinity, maybe, or 0, or somewhere in between. Who knows? It's sort of a
a moo kind of thing, non sequitur. My dad used to say, "What's the difference between a mouse?" Never mind. Right. Yeah. Words of creation ex nihilo, about which the representatives of Islamic esotericism can find nothing to say. A number of the sentences that follow, however, are compatible with this only if we take the metaphysical doctrine into consideration in its totality. Only the seeds of the doctrine exist in the passage, but it will be explained much more explicitly later. I like explicitly. What are we talking about? The key idea here is that of thubut, or immutability. Just say which in Ibn Arabi's technical lexicon means the state of the ayan thabita, the eternal haecceitous. Editor Edward, could you enlighten us about the eternal haecceitous? Eternal haecceitous are the individual, non-qualitative properties that define a thing's thisness, or unique identity, and are said to exist necessarily and eternally, whether or not the particular object itself exists. This concept is found primarily within analytic metaphysics and scholastic theology, and is distinct from a thing's quiddity, or whatness. And just as a fun side note, as I was typing in eternal haecceitous into Google, the top suggestion when I started to write HAE was eternal hemorrhoids? Oh, Google, always trying to be helpful. Thank you, Editor Edward. I had a feeling I wasn't pronouncing it correctly. End quote. Thubut is the way these, quote, possibilities, end quote, are present in divine knowledge. They do not exist. They are real only for God, not for themselves. But they are predisposed to being clothed with existence. Same disease. The presence of these possibilities, of these things, in divine knowledge is eternal, just as knowledge itself is. Since God did not become Al-Alim, the knower, he is the knower for all eternity, both past and to come. The concept of thubut, nevertheless, seems not to resolve all the problems that need to be reconciled in the revealed book. Verse 76:1, for example, refers to that moment in eternity. Our translation of Daher keeps Ibn Arabi's interpretation of the word in mind. It also one of the divine names. Okay. Keep going with the sentence. When man, quote, was not a thing present to the memory, end quote. In other words, when he was not maluman, or known. Here again, Ibn Arabi's metaphysics solves the problem, and at the same time resolves the contradiction between this passage from the Quran and all the verses affirming divine omniscience. That moment, which has no place in any time frame, corresponds to a degree of ontology, that of the ahadiyya. I will say, though, there might be one or two absolute brainless idiots, and I mean that in an insulting way, with no understanding whatsoever. There might be some real shitty, fucking stupid people who are not thoughtful at all and just racist and Islamophobic, who are like, what? Bill Burr went to Saudi Arabia? Ew, I don't like Arabia. Like, okay. That might exist. Like, that was kind of like that whole thing of, like, when Israel started bombing the living shit out of Gaza, and then there were people that were like,
stop bombing the shit out of Gaza. And then there were the people on the other side saying, you're pro-Hamas? You're defending Hamas? No, they weren't defending Hamas. But then there'd be one idiot in the crowd going, I'm defending Hamas. And it's like, you're just fucking ruining it for everybody. So there might be one racist in the crowd of people who thoughtfully are criticizing the idea of these people who are supposedly pro-free speech going to a place and signing a contract not to say anything bad about the royal family of Saudi Arabia, and in order to take millions of dollars to, wash the image of the royal family of Saudi Arabia, Yeah, there's like a thoughtful criticism to be had. And then there might be one idiot in the crowd of criticizers going, yeah, and because they're Muslim. Like, okay. Like, I've never seen someone that stupid, like, that among those critics. But I won't deny that the possibility that they exist. But I will also, continue to say that that's not the majority of the critics of those comedians. The critics of those comedians are not criticizing the comedians because the critics of the comedians are Islamophobic. And honestly, you're having said that was the first time I had seen anybody claim that was what the critics. So it was kind of like a little bit shocking for me to be like, I know that guy. Well, anyway, sorry. I hope you're not watching this. But if you are, then now you know how I felt seeing your comment on that post. We should stop using social media, shouldn't we? Is it helping? I mean, maybe it's like that whole thing of like, maybe it's helping the great brain of the earth, but the individual brain cells, sometimes burn out because of it. When man was not a thing present in memory, we read that. In other words, when he was not known, here again Ibn Arabi's metaphysics solves the problem, and at the same time resolves the contradiction between this passage from the Quran and all the verses affirming divine omniscience. That moment, which has no place in any time frame, corresponds to a degree of ontology, that of the ahadiyya, the pure unity of absolute undermined essence. Seen from this degree's particular vantage point, things are nothing, and it is thus ex nihilo that they are brought into existence. It is at the ontologically latter degree, though they do not follow one another in time, the degree of wahadiyya or wahdaniya or oneness, that under the effect of the mostly holy effusion, we see the appearance of both these ad intra determinations that the divine names are, and the ayan thabita that in potentiality and then in actuality by virtue of the holy effusion are the theaters of their epiphanies. Quote, the existence of the world after its inexistence for our master, Ibn Arabi, and for all individuals of divine unveiling, end quote, wrote Emir Abd al-Qadir, quote, refers to the consciousness that the ayan thabita obtain from their own efforts and from their states, and the fact that they become the places of manifestation of true being, for they do not acquire being, they just function as places of theophany. He who manifests himself in these places is true being, and he alone is named by the names of the possibilities and characterized by their attributes. Okay, we've taken one more step closer to being done with this introduction at the beginning of Book 2. And, parts of it were interesting. Maybe I was just a little distracted. Wow, this introduction is very long. Okay. So we're on page 17. The introduction starts on page 3. The introduction will continue on until page 43. So the Meccan Revelations petal, the green petal of the chicken wheel. For the foreseeable future, as far as the eye can see, literally, off into New Year's and beyond, We're going to be reading the introduction to this book, so we'll just settle in and just accept that we're not going to be reading Ibn Arabi for a while. We're going to be reading Michel Chodquitz. Michel Chodquitz is all right. I like his perspective. I think less so now. Now I'm a little more open to the ideas of like scholars, more or less in present day, and their perspective. Like for a while, I was like, nah. I don't want to hear your digested, like opinion that you got from your professor, in present day, interpreting in the, it's like the Theravadan scholar monks in the 6th century Common Era are existing, contrasting themselves against Mahayana. I don't want to hear about that until I have had a chance to read the entire Tipitaka, which existed before Mahayana, and digest it and develop my own ideas in a vacuum without the presence of Mahayana. Then I'll read the Mahayana. Then I'll read the commentaries of the Theravadan scholar monks, and then I can see the whole context. So, in other words, like personally, like rather than just having some like person explain it to me, like, okay, I've studied this and I'll put it in a nutshell for you. Like, I don't need nutshells. I want to, digest the information. I mean, if for no other reason than it's the last, like, interesting TV show. It's the last, thing that holds my interest. And that just barely. So, like, that vague curiosity about Martin Luther, Meccan Revelation, Carl Jung's Black Books, Tao Te Ching, and, I had read Tao Te Ching before, but Secret of the Golden Flower and I Ching, and okay, I'm going to create a space to dive in and fulfill this vague curiosity rather than just never doing it for the rest of my life. Basically is kind of what's happening. And if you're here watching, then great. If you're here watching and you hate it, you're free to do that. If you're here watching and you like it, cool. If you're neutral about it, all right, that's fine. But I keep saying if I wasn't doing it on camera, I wouldn't be doing it at all. Which is maybe not entirely true, but it is true. It's practically true. Like in my case, knowing me as I do, it's pretty much true. I'm just rewatching Battlestar Galactica or something right now if I wasn't doing this. So I do this for part of the time. And not only do I read it and comment on it, I listen to myself reading and commenting on it while I'm editing, and then I watch myself reading and commenting on it, and then sometimes I come to a different conclusion than the one I came to while I was reading and commenting on it. And then we move forward in life. And then I either remember to mention that to you later or I forget. And it has what, like people talk about value. Fuck you. Like, you're not the one with the value here. Fuck off. I know Gwydion already reacted to that lady in Meccan Revelations 64, but value. You take your own value and shove it up your own ass. Like, I'm not interested in your assessment of my value and your need to blurt out what you're, don't watch it. Read it yourself. Find someone else who's reading it out loud. Oh, there isn't anybody? Well, then you're fucked unless you are willing to read it yourself. Sorry. A little bit of bad vibes there at the end. Yeah, it is what it is. I'm not one of these white light only, like, hypocrites that you find in the yoga studios of Southern California. One of the top 4 or 5 reasons I left. All right. Well, that's the end of the cycle. The end of the cycle of 14. And have we learned anything? No, I don't know. Maybe got some pieces of the puzzle filled in and some data and some life experience along the way. Maybe a few chuckles, a few laughs. I don't think there's been any noticeable transformation. But it's one of those things, like if you only see, like if you're someone's aunt or cousin and you don't see them since they're 7 and then now they're 11, you're like, oh my God, you've grown. But their parents might be like, have they? You know, and then they look at an old picture and be like, holy shit, yeah, you have. And chicken philosophy is a little bit like that. Like if I tune in, when I see people like watching Carl Jung Black Books Part 1 and Part 2 and commenting on them as if I had anything to do with that guy, you know, me 3 years ago, whatever. And then when I watch it, I'm like, wow, yeah, I have come a long way, I guess. I know what obeisance means. Well, that was on Buddhist Books Podcast. I'm like, obeisance? Obeisance? What is that? Yeah, sometimes we learn new words on Buddhist Books Podcast and Chicken Philosophy. All right, I'm done now. Done talking, done yammering on. I hope that you had fun. If you're still here, I don't know, whoever's here, wish you all the best. And thank you for sticking even through the meandering, rambling, not very interesting, not very entertaining episodes, even all the way until the end. Unless you just happen to leave it on and you're like, God, what the hell is he going on about? I'm going to have to stop listening to this. In which case, that's all right. And I wish you well. I hope you have a good life out there without me. No. Yeah, okay. That's it. And if the synopsis video that includes all 15 of the, like the little clips of each of the past 15, with this one being the 15th one, if that's finished, that'll appear up here. But either way, the playlist of the beginning of 4715, of which this is the 15th and final, that playlist will be down here. So that's what's going on for the end screen. So if you want just a little short entertaining thing, click up here. If you want a whole long playlist, click down there. And you can always watch this, and then that will also link to this. So if you see this and then you're like, oh my God, what was that one with the yellow short shirt or whatever, then you can find whatever one it is in the playlist. And anyway, that's what's happening. We're ending a cycle of 15. Next up, it'll be Edward reading Carl Jung's Black Books as it was in the beginning of Chicken Philosophy. Until then.